Chapter 39. The examiners in charge of the academy examinations were already standing on the stage, and the female teachers who were holding the lots had already recorded their respective items, as they were to be tested in groups. First was the female group, the 4 categories of zither, chess, calligraphy, and painting. Among the students of Guangwantang, the first-level students did not need to go through the academy examinations, and only the second and third-level students. The third-level students were in the next group, and this group of second-level students were only 20 over people. The females that came to Guangwantang were the daughters of noble families in the capital, and Shu daughters naturally did not have the qualifications. Among the D daughters, there was no lack of teachers that came to the residence to teach. Moreover, the threshold for entering Guangwantang was not low, and every year they had to pay 1,000 taels of silver. Initially, Shen Xian did not care about these worldly possessions and sent the 3 daughters of the Shen residence to Guangwantang. Ren Wanyuan was somewhat dissatisfied with this, but with a wave of Shen Xian's hand, she did not dare to continue to argue. After all, the money that was confiscated was the emperor's reward for Shen Xian's battles. The 22 people were divided into 4 groups. There were more people in the zither category, and there were 7 people. Females always liked these kinds of things that could highlight their charm, and the other 3 categories had 5 people. In the painting group that Shen Miao was in, there was Shen Yu, the left imperial censor's D-daughter Qin Qing, Fan Luer of the Fengtian residence's magistrate, and Zhao Yin of the left assistant minister's family. Fan Luer and Zhao Yin were somewhat disappointed. Fan Luer was good at the zither category, and Zhao Yin was good at chess. Not everyone was like Shen Yu, who was proficient in every category. Not being able to draw the category that they were good at, Fan Luer and Zhao Yin were not very happy in front of the males. It was Qin Qing who was as arrogant as usual. Qin Qing's beauty was the only one in Guangwantang who could compete with Shen Yu, but it was not because of talent. Even though Shen Yu was also gentle and beautiful, Qin Qing's beauty could suppress her without batting an eyelid. Shen Miao's gaze landed on Qin Qing. Today she was wearing a green cotton embroidered robe with wide sleeves, and there was a goose yellow belt around her waist which made her slender waist less than a grasp, and the fluttering of her clothes made her look like a fairy. Compared to the soft and weak Shen Yu, she was more like a lotus. However, this arrogant and beautiful woman followed the late emperor and began to clean up the aristocratic families. After the left imperial censor's family was defeated, she became a prostitute for the army. Later, it was said that she took a knife and died together with a small general in the army camp. Seeming to have sensed Shen Miao's gaze, Qin Qing looked over with some surprise before turning his head away in disgust, as if he was unwilling to look at Shen Miao. Shen Miao did not bother about it, but it was Feng and Ning who was standing beside her who pulled the corner of her clothes. At that time, you just draw casually and do not think too much. Feng and Ning's thoughts were simple. She would eventually make a fool of herself, and to make a fool of herself in such an open manner would make others feel bored. But if Shen Miao did something out of line on the stage in order to fight for her pride, that would be a big problem. Shen Miao nodded. The official on the stage banged the drum heavily, signaling the start of the academy examination. The first thing to compare was Qin. It could be considered as Feng and Ning's good luck, as the female students who drew Qin today had mediocre skills. Coincidentally, those who played the zither the best didn't get this category. For no reason, Feng and Ning picked up a bargain. And Feng and Ning's recent days of hard work in the zither skills was finally not in vain. When she was sitting upright, there was a bit of a virtuous lady's style, and in addition she was good-looking. The zither sound was faint, and compared to the previous few mediocre zither skills, it was like a gust of wind that blew on one's face. There was a blue-clad youth at the male side of the banquet, lingering for 3 days. When Kai Lin heard it, he kicked that youth unhappily. What is this considered as? That is because one did not see Yuer's zither skills. If Yuer were to play a song, even the fairies from the 9 heavens would not be able to compare. Inexperienced. Kai Lin had always protected his sweetheart, but when Su Ming Lang heard his words, he curled his lips in disdain and seemed to want to say something, but when he saw his eldest brother's warning eyes, he held it in. The Qin category quickly finished, and the few examiners on the stage began to discuss and judge. After the Qin category was over, it was the chess skills. The process of the chess skills was much simpler. 5 people would play against each other, and one game would be the winner, and the score would be given based on the playing style and style. In this category, the winner was Yi Pei Lan. After the chess was the book category. Xin Qing, Bai Wei and Jiang Shaoxian were in the same group. These 3 people were good friends on normal days, but in the academy examinations, the atmosphere was rather tense. This time the book was to compose a poem with today's chrysanthemum as the topic. One reason was to look at the calligraphy, and the other was to look at one's talent. Xin Qing's best skills were not poetry but chess and calligraphy. Unfortunately, calligraphy was in the male group, and she did not draw chess. But until the final result, no one would know who was the first in this category. At the end, it was Xun Miao's group's turn. Xun Yu glanced at Xin Miao. Most likely, she bore a grudge against Xun Miao for making her look bad. Xin Miao did not maintain the appearance of a good older sister. She smiled and said to Xun Miao, later on the stage, 5th younger sister must give way to older sister. This kind of confident appearance, even I am somewhat afraid. These words were heard by Fan Luer, who was standing at the side and could not help but laugh. Xin Yu, what are you talking about? What confident appearance? Could it be that Xin Miao has some tricks up her sleeves? Now that you mention it, I also have some expectations. Zhao Yin rejoiced in others' misfortune. Remember last year when Shan Miao drew the zither, she pulled out the strings of other people's bamboo fragrant zither. Most likely she inherited General Shun's bravery. This year when drawing, one must not break the brush. As she spoke, she touched Shan Miao's cheeks. Such a white and tender face. Would it be painted into a face by oneself later? Xin Miao did not move and looked at her indifferently. Under that extremely cold gaze, Zhao Yan's smile gradually froze. Fan Luer also felt that Shen Miao's expression was not good, and her heart suddenly felt an inexplicable lingering fear. Involuntarily, she pulled Zhao Yan's hand back. Qin Qing seemed to be somewhat impatient and looked at Shen Miao. What are you quarreling about? If you want to quarrel, go quarrel on the stage and let everyone see your faces. When she said that, even though Zhao Yan and the rest were dissatisfied, they did not speak anymore. At the male side of the banquet, Kai Lin looked at Xian Yu's figure excitedly, but that glutinous rice dumpling pulled Su Ming Feng. That beautiful older sister is also there. Eldest brother look. Su Ming Feng did not know whether to laugh or cry, as he did not know why his younger brother was so persistent with Xin Miao. He was already in the 3rd year of the country, and this time he lied that it was the first time he went out after he was seriously ill, and he appeared to be very weak, so he could not participate in the academy examinations. He also knew of Shun Miao's name since the entire Ding capital knew that the formidable great general swept across the battlefield, but gave birth to an idiot daughter. She will definitely win. Su Ming Lang clenched his fist and said. Su Ming Feng's heart was non-committal as he knew that today it would be Shun Yu who would come out on top. Before going on stage, Xin Yu could not help but tease Xin Miao. 5th younger sister, later do not be lenient. Older sister will wait for you. Definitely. Xin Miao answered. She would definitely not be lenient. Chapter 40. The chief examiner was the Grand Secretary of the Cabinet, Zhong Ziqi. He was a little old man with a head full of gray hair, but was usually very serious and upright. He only opened the scroll in his hands and began to read out the examination questions. Regarding the painting side, it was actually different every year, but this year the Academy examinations and the Chrysanthemum Banquet happened to be together, so the questions were much simpler. Just like book with Chrysanthemum as the title, painting also with Chrysanthemum as the title. There were 5 long tables on the stage, and there were brushes, ink, paper, and inkstone on the table. One would walk to the table in order, and the drummers would beat the drums heavily, signaling the start of the Academy examinations. Everyone stretched their necks to look up. These 5 people could be considered as the 5 people with unique characteristics. Xin Yu was a talented female that everyone knew. Qin Qing was beautiful and arrogant. Fan Luer and Zhao Yin were a pair of sisters that had a good relationship, and Shen Miao was naturally that stupid and ignorant idiot. Most of the males were looking at Xin Yu and Qin Qing, but most of the females were looking at Xin Miao. Bai Wei covered her mouth and said, Today Xin Miao seemed to be well behaved and did not have any strange actions. It looks like it is the case. Including this time, Xin Miao had passed through a total of 4 academy examinations. The first time she drew a chess piece, She randomly played a few pieces and was defeated like a landslide. The second time she drew a book, she overturned the ink plate and dirted her clothes. The third time she drew a zither and the string of a good bamboo zither was broken by her. Rather than saying that everyone was here to watch Shun Miao go up the stage, it was better to say that she would make a fool of herself in front of everyone. But today it was somewhat different. The high stage was wide, and the young female was sitting in front of the table. Her actions of holding the brush were very proper, as if she had received rigorous training, as if there was not a single bit of mistake that could be picked out. In the golden autumn of the 10th month, the cold wind blew through the hall and lifted the stray hair on her forehead. She lowered her head slightly, and one could only see the oval-shaped little face and the eyelashes that hung down, drawing a beautiful arc. There was actually some beauty. That lotus-green cloak fluttered fiercely. She sat upright, but her brush was free and unrestrained, as if she didn't care. However, that kind of confident bearing was like the begonia in her black hair, blooming openly in a reserved way. Yi Foran pursed her lips and said to Ren Wanyun with an unclear meaning, "Fifth mother has really grown up." Ren Wanyun forced a smile, but her hands quietly tightened. Behind him came the chatter of the girls. Up until now, Shun Miao has not made a fool of herself. Could it be that she has really changed? That's impossible. She's probably just putting on an act. Didn't you see that she didn't even think before writing? Shinyu still needs to think for a few more moments, but for her to be like this, the biggest possibility is that she is just casually painting. Feng and Ning looked at Shin Miao on the stage, and that strange feeling came again. She suddenly had an intuition that today's chrysanthemum banquet might not be like the past. For example, would Shin Miao on the stage really make a fool of herself? Or was it to destroy all the misconceptions people had about her in an unstoppable manner? At the male side of the banquet, some people gradually discovered the difference. This group was probably the most pleasing to the eye out of all the women's groups. Shun Yu's pink dress was simple and elegant, gentle and beautiful. Qin Qingqing's green dress was wide-sleeved, arrogant and beautiful. Fan Luer was delicate and charming. Zhao Yin was weird, and if one were to say who had the least special characteristics, it would be that stupid, cowardly, and tacky Shin Miao. But at a glance, among the five of them, Shun Miao was not only not inferior, but stood out. She just sat there quietly with her head lowered, but she gave off the feeling that she was looking down on all living things. It was as if that delicate figure was standing on a high and decisive position, causing people to involuntarily feel the urge to submit to her. Pei Lang frowned. How could a person's temperament undergo such an earth-shattering change? Was this person really Shin Miao? Fu Xiao could not hide the surprise in his heart. It was not that he noticed the earth-shattering difference between Shen Miao and the past, but the way Shin Miao sat, the straight back and the way she raised her hands made him think of a person. The current mistress of the 6 palaces, the Empress. Fu Xiao knew that his own thoughts were very ridiculous. The entire Ding capital knew that Shen Miao loved him, and he hated himself to be loved by such a female. But most of the time, the news about Shun Miao was heard from rumors. It was rumored that Shun Miao was ignorant and incompetent, unbearably tacky, rough, stupid, and cowardly. Now it seemed that there was only one feeling in his heart. One fear that those rumors were not all true. Really strange. The blue-clad youth who was previously reprimanded by Kai Lin said curiously, "Wasn't it said that the second-year student Shin Miao is an idiot? It does not look like it." Kai Lin was also stunned. His eyes kept following Shen Miao, but Shun Miao seemed to have a kind of magic that made one involuntarily notice her. It was as if she was born to stand in a position that others could see, and it was especially obvious today. He tried hard to suppress his own strange thoughts and snorted, "Just putting on an act. Eldest brother, she will win." Su Ming Lang tugged at the sleeves of the person beside him. Su Ming Feng's brows were smiling, but his expression was somewhat strange. Shin Miao? After the time it took for an incense stick to burn, the drummer beat the drum again, indicating that the time was up. Shin Yu put down her brush. She was very confident in her painting today. Beside her left was Qin Qing. Qin Qing had also completed his painting and was washing the brush. Even if it was a simple action, when done by her, it was as moving as a painting. But no matter how moving it was, in the academy examinations, one would not rely on one's beauty to speak. She then turned her head to look at Xin Miao, and thought that Xin Miao had always achieved nothing, but there was no accident today. Most likely it was because there was someone beside her that she became smarter. One could pretend, but one could not pretend one's talent. At this moment she should be in a fluster and had not finished. However, in front of her, Xin Miao had already put down her brush and calmly looked at the people who came to collect the paintings. Xin Yu's smile stiffened. All right, go down. After everyone's paintings were collected, it would be the academy examinations for the second-year female, and this would require time. Fifth younger sister, what exactly did you draw? After Xin Yu came down from the stage, she could not wait to ask Xin Miao. She did not know why, but Xin Miao made her very uneasy. You will know in a while. Xin Miao gently smiled, and there seemed to be something more meaningful in her smile. She turned around and walked to a place where no one could see before speaking to Guyu beside her. Think of a way to send this to the hands of second young master of the Annals residence. Oh, it is the person dressed in green on the opposite seat from the left. Guyu hesitated for a moment and seemed to be somewhat confused before saying, this servant will save it. Go. Xin Miao patted her shoulder and walked back to her original seat. From afar, she looked at Pei Lang. When Pei Lang looked up, he met with a pair of eyes. Even from afar, one could see the scrutiny contained within. Apologies, Pei Lang. Xin Miao thought in her heart, I will borrow your hands to shake the unbreakable foundation of the imperial family of Ming Qi. After all, you owe me. Chapter 41. The examiners on the stage were evaluating the results, and the students below the stage were also discussing. Today Xin Miao did not make a fool of herself, and it made the academy examinations somewhat boring, but it also made those who usually did not look at her to pay attention to her. Humans were all strange. Those who were bad usually only needed to perform a little better, and perhaps in the eyes of others, they would be able to turn over a new leaf. Feng and Ning was somewhat nervous and would look towards the examiners on the stage from time to time. One did not know what the reason was, but the few Darren on the stage seemed to be arguing. It seems that today is also very intense. Fu Xiuan smiled, but females, there is no need to be so calculative as they will not enter officialdom. His character had always been somewhat conceited, and was not afraid that the Darren beside him would be dissatisfied if they heard it. After all, some of their daughters were those students who were on the stage. The academy examinations opportunity is rare, Fu Xiui said. Naturally, one must grasp it well. Ninth younger brother said correctly. Fu Xiuxian picked up the teacup on the table and drank a mouthful before saying, if there is a particularly outstanding female, ninth younger brother can also pay attention. Even though he looked calm, he was not easy to deal with. Both openly and secretly, he was probing if Fu Xiu would find a wife with a strong background for himself. Fifth older brother is joking. Fu Xiu shook his head. My marriage. Imperial father will make the decision, and it is not up to me to comment. That was also true, as Fu Xiuyi's daily matters were arranged by the emperor, and rarely would he take the initiative to have any ideas. In the eyes of outsiders, this kind of prince was simply too docile and did not have any ambitions, exactly the same as consort Dong Shu, but in the eyes of Prince Jing, Fu Xiuxian, there were some differences. In one's life, one would have to take a gamble. Isn't it the same for a wife? Prince Jing's words had a hidden meaning, until the end. Who would know what the ending would be? Prince Zhou could also hear his younger brother's probing of Fu Xiu, and his eyes turned but did not speak. Not long later, the examiner on the stage stood up to announce the results. In the zither category, it was no surprise that Feng and Ning took the lead. Originally, there was no one that was particularly powerful in this group, and Feng and Ning was considered to be very outstanding. Naturally, she was happy and went up to receive the invitation for the academy examinations, and happily went down the stage to show it to Feng Foreign. Madame Feng was very happy to see this. To a lady, this kind of glory, although it was impossible for her to become an official, it was like the icing on the cake. The children of noble families naturally did not lack wealth and glory, but their own talent and beauty could clearly distinguish them from each other. Feng and Ning used today's academy examinations to raise her level by one level. In chess, Bai Wei came out on top. There were examiners who specialized in recording the chess games, and they showed the drawn chess paths to the people below to show it to ensure fairness. Xin Miao glanced at the chess game. Bai Wei's game was much more detailed, so he had made it to the end. It was a pity that he paid too much attention to the details and didn't look at the big picture. Instead, he slowed down the progress and was somewhat burdensome. In the book category, Shunqing only got second place. The first was Yi Peilon. Her poem about chrysanthemum was elegant and lovely. Even though it was too much for an unmarried young lady to write such a poem, but Guangwen Tang had the advantage of breaking through the shackles of etiquette, and the requirements for females were not too harsh. In addition, the little poem was indeed interesting and lovely. It was not purely about chrysanthemum, but it was using chrysanthemum to express one's yearning. Thus the level went up another level. Xin Qing's expression was not good, but she was naturally not good at composing poems. Thus she was very helpless. The last one was Xin Miao's group of paintings. The examiners on the stage had different expressions, and it seemed that the most intense dispute was this group. The womenfolk were guessing that Xin Yu and Qin Qing each had their own merits, and it was difficult to choose. After all, these two people were often compared in Guangwen Tang. Qin Qing sat at the same spot with an arrogant expression, as if she did not care about the result at all, but the fingers that were holding the teacup were somewhat stiff. In comparison, it was Shun Yu who was much more calm. She sat beside Chen Roqiu, and her gaze was somewhat coquettish and shy. Chen Roqiu looked at her gently. This daughter was intelligent and sensitive, and her talent was as outstanding as her. She was proficient in the four arts, and every year in the academy examinations, she would always be in the limelight. Seeing how happy she looked, today it should be in the bag. Xin Yu naturally had a well-thought-out card up her sleeve. She had the strength of her brushwork, the interest, and even the idea had been thought of. It was as if she had long found out the preferences of the examiners, and was always able to come up with the best works. So what if Qin Qing was beautiful? At the end, she was only good to look at but useless. Thinking that she was useless, her gaze turned towards Shen Miao, who was sitting at the other side. Today Shen Miao had caused her to suffer such a big loss, and she thought that Shen Miao would make a fool of herself on the academy examination stage, but who knew that Shen Miao had escaped safely. But now that the paintings were to be shown to everyone, Shen Miao would not be able to avoid ridicule. In any case, she was going to make a fool of herself, and a trace of happiness flashed in her heart. The examiner who was in charge of reading out the results sang loudly on the stage. Painting group's first rank, Xin Miao. Xin Miao? First rank. A stone stirred up 1,000 ripples, and everyone started to clamor. Even the voices of the examiner who was reading out the first few names were drowned out. Shen Yu's smile suddenly froze on her face. She looked incredulously at Chen Roqiu, and her voice trembled. Mother, just now who was the first rank? I must have heard it wrongly. Chen Roqiu pinched Shan Yu's arm. Even though she was angry in her heart, she had eaten more meals than Shen Yu and knew that in this situation, there would definitely be a lot of people who wanted to see Shen Yu's reaction. It would be all right if Shen Yu was magnanimous, but for her to be in such a desperate situation, she had already fallen into a disadvantageous position. Even though Xin Qing and Ren Wanyun rejoiced in others' misfortune, this was the first time Shen Yu's face was swept away by others. But when they heard that it was Shen Miao, they were also surprised. They thought that the examiner had mistaken Shen Yu's and Xin Miao's names. There was a lot of discussion in the female side of the banquet, and naturally there was an uproar in the male side of the banquet. What is going on? Why is it not little Yu? Kylan suddenly stood up and looked at his classmate. Did I hear it wrongly? Is it that old man who read it wrongly? Naturally, she was not the only one who had such thoughts, especially the youths who were in the same class as Shen Miao, as they were discussing with a look of extreme surprise. Look, older brother. I knew that she would win. Su Minglang pulled Su Mingfeng. In this group of people, he was probably the happiest as the white fat on his face shook. Su Mingfeng also had a headache. Who would have thought that it was Shen Miao? One had to know that every time before the academy examinations, there would be private casinos that would come and gamble. He had bet on Shen Yu, but he had bet 1,000 liang of silver. Well, 1,000 liang of silver had all gone down the drain. If Master Su knew about it, he would definitely tear him apart. Looking at Su Minglang, who was jumping up and down in joy, Su Mingfeng wanted to cry but had no tears. Pei Lang frowned but did not look at the examiner on the stage, but looked at the purple-clad young female in the female side of the banquet. Her face was abnormally calm as she indifferently looked at everyone's surprise and doubt. She had long known that she would win. Chapter 42. The discussion continued, and the examiner on stage had already shown the painting to everyone to show the fairness of the results. Fan Luer's and Zhao Yan's paintings were of the same path. Both were the scenery of a garden with chrysanthemum blooming. In all fairness, it was beautiful, but the artistic conception was too mediocre, so naturally it was ranked at the back. Qin Qing, on the other hand, had painted a red fairy with a big chrysanthemum. This was most likely a type of chrysanthemum that she was familiar with. The painting only depicted this chrysanthemum, and it was so vivid and lifelike. It could be considered that she had taken a different path and completely ran away from the artistic conception and only casually displayed her own painting skills. A red fairy was vividly displayed on the paper, and it was really beautiful. But the Academy examinations not only tested one's painting skills, but also the meaning of the painting, so no matter how beautiful this chrysanthemum was, it was only ranked third. Very quickly, it was Shan Yu's painting. Shan Yu bit her lips as she sat beside Shinrochio. She barely managed to maintain a smile on her face, but her fists were tightly clenched. If it was in the past, she would be smiling lightly and accept everyone's sincere praise and envy. But now, this second was like a deep irony that made her feel that everyone was looking at her with ridicule and ridicule. Shan Yu's painting was a remnant chrysanthemum. The wind and rain rustled, and a lot of the chrysanthemum petals in the courtyard had fallen, but the scattered petals were still firmly attached to the branches and stood straight, as if it was an important person with integrity. And at the side, there were 2 sentences from a poem: "Rather die holding the fragrance on the branches than to be blown away by the north wind." This painting was considered to have a lofty intention. Generally speaking, from the painting to the person, the remnant chrysanthemum in the painting was of high quality, and the person who painted would be able to see that it was of high moral character. The examiner in charge loved such a talented and moral person the most. If Shan Yu's painting was not able to get first rank, it was really unimaginable what Shen Miao had painted. Painted so well? How could it be second? Bai Wei exclaimed, "I really do not understand." Chen Rochio also could not understand. Initially, she thought that Shan Yu was slightly nervous today and had taken a wrong path. Who knew that when this painting was taken out, she knew that her daughter did not do anything wrong, and it was the same as the previous Academy examinations. It was indeed a well-deserved first rank. But why was the result different? Ren Wanyun was somewhat rejoicing in Shan Yu's misfortune. Shan Yu was outstanding and had always suppressed Shenqing in the Academy examinations. Seeing that Shan Yu suffered a loss this time, even though Shen Miao winning first place made her unhappy, but since it had nothing to do with her, she was always happy to watch the show. The examiner on the stage ordered the 2 children to unroll the scroll, and the noise stopped abruptly. The drawing paper was very big, and Shen Miao's painting had too much white space. Her painting skills were not outstanding. Therefore, he only drew a rough view of the distant scenery, but unexpectedly, there was a kind of magnificent atmosphere. On the scroll, yellow sand was endless, and a setting sun was gushing blood red. A broken sword stood in the yellow soil, and a white chrysanthemum was below the sword. Here, the chrysanthemum seemed to be just an ornament. It was so small that even the meridians of the petals could not be seen. But in this painting, it was like a finishing touch. A bleak and desolate feeling gushed out. Everyone present was silent for a moment. Even through the pen and paper, one could feel the desolation and misery in it, as well as the helpless struggle. That was war. Shinrochio and Shan Yu trembled at the same time. After seeing clearly what was painted on the scroll, they knew that there was absolutely no possibility of a comeback in this match. Yes, Shan Yu was indeed elegant, and her character was not gaudy, and was able to take care of her character and nobility. But Shen Miao's painting had completely jumped out of the person. If one said that Shan Yu was using the chrysanthemum to praise people, then Shan Miao was using the flower to express her will. How could the feelings of a lone person be compared to the cruelty of war? Chapter 43. No wonder those examiners were arguing endlessly just now and were slow to come to a conclusion. One feared that they did not think that such a majestic painting was actually drawn by the idiot Shan Miao's hands. The chief examiner, the grand secretary of the cabinet Zhong Ziqi said, "Student Shin Miao, come up and talk about why this painting was made." Every student who obtained first rank would have to talk about their understanding of getting the first rank. However, today Shan Miao was asked to talk about the reason for the painting. Naturally, it was because everyone did not believe that she was able to make this painting and feared that it was an idea that she heard from somewhere else. Xinqing smiled and whispered to Pei Lan at the side, "This time the cat is out of the bag." But this was really not drawn by her? Pei Lan was somewhat puzzled. Just now we all saw it. She personally drew it stroke by stroke. That painting skill is not outstanding. As for the painting intent, who knows if there was someone guiding it? Xinqing looked disdainfully at Shin Miao, who was walking up the stage. After living with her for so many years, I still do not know what she knows. Now that Grand Secretary Zhong wants her to talk about the reason for the painting, one think that she would not be able to say it. One fear that she would lose all her face again. Pei Lan also smiled when she heard it. Like I said, how could there be such a saying of becoming a talented female so quickly? One fear that it was to attract that person. Her eyes ambiguously swept over to Prince Ding's side of the male side of the banquet. To invite an expert to guide, Shan Miao could be considered to have racked her brains for him. Shun Qing's face stiffened and suppressed the unhappiness in her heart. Let's take a look. On the stage, Shun Miao quietly looked at the unfolded scroll. She slowly stretched out her hand and under everyone's astonished gaze, she caressed the painting. The reason why this painting was made was because I heard from my father that every year on the battlefield, there were many heroes who died on the battlefield, dying in the yellow sands. But the journey was long, and they could only be buried on the battlefield. At that time, there were no chrysanthemums in the northwest deserts or the northern grasslands. Chrysanthemums bloomed in the warm south and in the bustling Ding capital. There were songs and dances to celebrate peace, and there was no need to worry about food and clothing, but it was at the cost of the lives of the soldiers at the border. The discussion gradually stopped, and everyone's eyes gathered on the purple-clothed girl. Her gaze was calm, and she spoke as if she was narrating a story. My father once said that the soldiers who died in the war couldn't even have a bunch of chrysanthemums after their sacrifice. There would be no flowers blooming on the battlefield, and the generals and soldiers would not even be able to experience a complete mourning. Their wives and children can only stay far away, wearing white chrysanthemums on their heads and offering them white chrysanthemums. I believe that the reason everyone is able to calmly admire chrysanthemums here is all because there are brave men guarding the border. It's a pity that I can't do anything for them. I can only paint a bunch of white chrysanthemums in front of a pile of yellow soil to comfort their souls. The young girl stood in the wind. Her eyes were clear, but her words were powerful and resonant. It was as if her words were the only thing in the world that was clear and sweet. However, they were like morning bells and evening drums, beating on everyone's hearts. Shin Miao lowered her eyes slightly. Did the Tian family of Ming Qi not want to deal with the aristocratic families and the Shin family? But the world was so big that everyone's eyes would see and everyone's ears would listen. Preventing the people's mouths was more important than preventing a river. Since the Tian family wanted to attack the general residence, she would let everyone in the world take a look. Look, the Shin family used their lives to fight for meritorious deeds. The Shin family used their lives to guard the city walls of Ming Qi. Now all of you nobles were singing and dancing in the capital, and it was all because of the blood and flesh on the battlefield. Stepping on the blood of the soldiers, would the imperial family of Ming Qi still dare to suppress them with great fanfare? If you dare, then do not be afraid of the eyes of everyone in the world. Chapter 44. The most supreme thing was the imperial power. What was more powerful than the imperial power was the common people's mouths. Of course, one could use an iron fist to suppress it, but when that day comes, the common people would not dare to speak nonsense and the joke would spread out. Wouldn't it be the biggest joke in the world? The imperial family of Ming Qi was probably like this. It was obvious that they were corrupt internally and had done many dirty things, but on the surface they still had to put on a face that they cared about the country. They enjoyed the protection and offerings of the aristocratic families with a clear conscience, but at the end, they had to make a false accusation. Shin Miao's words made everyone present gradually quiet down. The daughters thought of the glory of their ancestors, and if the residence was a military general, they would be even more moved. The male students were at the age where they were full of vigor, and the soldiers on the battlefield were admired everywhere, so naturally they would worship heroes. But there were some who were not so happy. The three princes of Ming-Chi who were present all frowned at the same time. Others did not know, but they knew what the imperial family's intention was: to treat the aristocratic families. The Shun family was a tall tree that attracted the wind, and sooner or later, the emperor would use other excuses to eradicate them. However, the Shin family had a good reputation among the common people for so many years, and to topple them was not something that could be done overnight. Now Shun Miao's words seemed to be mourning the soldiers, but in fact it was praising the meritorious deeds, and also put the soldiers in a position of being in the spotlight. If the imperial family had a trace of inappropriateness, they would be in the wrong in terms of morality and conduct. Was she doing it intentionally? Everyone looked up, and after the young female finished speaking, she became silent. Her robe was a little loose, and it fluttered in the cold wind, making her figure seem even more delicate. Most likely she was thinking wrongly, as she was just a daughter in the boudoir. This time she was able to uncharacteristically take the lead was because she was Shen Xian's daughter, and Shen Xian had really told her about the matters on the battlefield. Thus she was lucky. Prince Yu's gaze followed the purple-clad young female, and in a flash, he suddenly smiled meaningfully. This young lady of the Shun family is indeed very interesting. One did not know why, but when Prince Yu's words came out, Pei Lang and Fu Xiui frowned at the same time, and there was a trace of a bad premonition in their hearts. When Prince Zhou heard it, he asked meaningfully, "Does Royal Shu fancy that young lady of the Shin family?" One heard that the young lady of the Shin family is ignorant and idiotic, but now it seems that it is not so. She has a sharp tongue, and looks are not bad. If there is an additional royal saw, he laughed very obscene. It should be very interesting. Prince Yu of the first rank was now over 40 years old, and in addition to his brutality and viciousness, the number of females that were played to death by him was uncountable. If Shun Miao were to fall into his hands, one feared that in a short period of time, she would perish. Zhou's words were already out, but he had such arrogant temperament, so others would not find it strange when he said it. However, it was really too immoral to put a budding girl into such a tiger's mouth without rhyme or reason. Prince Jing, however, thought further than his own twin brother. Even though the imperial family had the intention to suppress the Shin family, but the Shin family had military power in their hands, like a common man with a treasure. If any prince were to obtain the Shin family's help in private, it would be a huge bargaining chip in the road to the throne. But if Shin Miao were to marry to Prince Yu, then Prince Yu would no longer be able to fight for power. Perhaps the best way would be to place the military power in the imperial family and not be coveted by any prince. Thinking of this, Prince Jing, Fu Xiui nodded his head. The young lady of the Shun family is quick-witted. If Royal Shu feels that it is not bad, there is nothing wrong. Fu Xiuyi's brows wrinkled even tighter. He naturally considered the things that Prince Jing could think of. He knew that Shun Miao marrying to Prince Yu residence would have 100 benefits and no harm to him. Firstly, he could get rid of Shin Miao's entanglement, and there would be one less peach blossom joke. Secondly, the Shin family's military power was too hot, and even if he had the intention to use it, he was afraid that it would cause the emperor to suspect that the gains would not make up for the losses. It would be better to leave it in Prince Yu residence and wait for an opportunity to make a move. But he did not know why he felt that there was an unpleasant thought in his heart, as if it was not right to do so. Pei Lang looked worriedly at Shun Miao, who was walking down the stage. Her steps were unhurried, and her expression was calm. Most likely, she did not know that her fate was already in the hands of this group of imperial children. He sighed in his heart. After all, they were teacher and student, but he was just a little teacher and could not change anything. He could only feel pity for Shun Miao's fate in his heart. Prince Yu of the first rank waved his hands impatiently and did not seem to be very happy. The smile on his lips was indeed somewhat sinister. Imperial nephew, it is not that this prince does not know what you all are planning. The residents of Prince Yu of the first rank would not be able to eat up this big Buddha of the Shin family. His eyes landed on his stump leg. But the young lady of the Shun family is interesting. It would not be bad to bring her over to play. Su Mingfeng took a look at this side. He was close to Fu Xiaoyi and the rest and only seriously watched the situation on the stage, but his heart was somewhat indignant. No matter how stupid that Shin Miao was, to be targeted by Prince Yu of the first rank, one feared that it would bode ill rather than well. It would be all right if Shin Xian was in the Ding capital, but unfortunately Shin Xian would only return at the end of the year. Without father and older brothers to protect, how would a young lady contend with these vicious wolves? As if he had expected the tragic ending, Su Mingfeng sighed and brought Su Minglang to Master Su before quietly leaving the banquet. Shin Miao did not know about the changes at the male side of the banquet. Jingzhe was very happy for Shen Miao, but it was Shen Yu who finally could not maintain the good expression on her face and left the banquet somewhat stiffly. After the female group's examinations, it was the male group's turn. On the side of the female side, the young ladies who had passed the examinations all left the banquet to rest. Feng and Ning followed beside Shen Miao, and this previously arrogant young lady finally revealed a look of heartfelt admiration towards Shen Miao. She said, "Just now you did really well. It was really great." Shin Miao lightly replied, "You are also not bad." Most likely it was because she thought that she got first place in the Qin category. Feng and Ning smiled. Hard work does not fail those who are willing. I will go to the horse carriage to get something. Wait for me here. After Feng and Ning left, Shen Miao walked to the plum blossom forest and Bei Yin Tang to wait for her. The plum blossoms had not bloomed in this season, but the trees were verdant and very lush. Guyu walked out from it and looked around before whispering, "Young lady, it has already been sent to Gentleman Librarian Jing's hands. It was changed by bribing the servant outside to ensure safety." "Very good," Shin Miao said. Guyu was still somewhat puzzled as she did not understand why her young lady would do this. One had to know that it was impossible for her young lady to be acquainted with the gentleman of Librarian Jing's family. Just at this moment, one heard a chuckle from the top of the head. The three of them looked up and saw that on the branches of the nearby trees, there was a touch of purple that floated down and landed in front of the three of them in a blink of an eye. That purple-clad youth's appearance was so charming that it did not look like a mortal. His hands were folded across his chest as he lazily leaned against the tree trunk. There was a smile, but not a smile on his lips, but his eyes were as deep as the Ding capital's winter night, with a chilly coldness. It was Xie Jingxing. Chapter 45. Young lady. Gu Yu and Jingzhe were somewhat vigilant as they stood in front of Shen Miao to protect her. Shouting loudly would be too much of a loss of composure. Moreover, this youth was dressed in brocade clothes and was born with a noble and beautiful appearance, making one unable to help but suspect his identity. But after all, he was a stranger. Gu Yu and Jingzhe were afraid that there would be an accident. Gu Yu, Jingzhe, both of you guard at the entrance of the forest, Shin Miao said. But young lady, both of them were somewhat hesitant. Go. Shin Miao slightly frowned. One did not know why, but she was very good at giving orders. Every time she ordered the maids to do something, there would be an inexplicable majesty that no one dared to refute. Jingzhe and Gu, you could only retreat to the entrance of the forest. You are indeed interesting. Xie Jingxing leaned against the tree trunk and looked at her playfully. He was obviously a noble young master, but his eyes were as sharp as a bloody blade on the battlefield, and his plain tone was able to bring out a biting cold intent. He was after all a person who had seen blood on the battlefield. What does Marquis Xie want to say? Shin Miao asked. Xie Jingxing suddenly appeared, and naturally it was not for idle chatter. Even though this person was young, the way he did things was very insightful. Since the old Marquis could not control him, he would be even more unbridled in the way he did things, making others unable to grasp the path. Prince Yu residence is currently lacking a Wang Fei. That cripple seemed to have taken a fancy to you and wanted to congratulate you. His tone was unclear. However, to call Prince Yu a cripple was considered to be very daring, but when Xie Jingxing said it, there was a trace of contempt and ridicule, as if Prince Yu was just an unbearably dirty plaything. This person's ambition was very high. Shin Miao was thinking in her heart, but did not show it on her face. She had actually forgotten what this calm look represented in the other person's eyes. Xie Jingxing suddenly took a step forward. He was extremely tall, and Xin Miao's entire person was under his shadow. The purple-clad youth leaned over slightly and whispered in her ear, "You indeed already knew." There was a nice cold bamboo scent coming from the youth's body, and his voice was deliberately lowered to have an ambiguous magnetism. This action was also ambiguous. Xin Miao looked up, and that handsome face was right in front of her, and the corners of his lips were slightly hooked up, adding a bit of evil air to his smile. But after all, she was not a real budding girl. She only slightly lowered her eyes and said, "So what if I know? So what if I don't know?" Xie Jingxing saw that she was indifferent and was too lazy to act like a playboy, so he pushed her away without any tenderness towards the fairer sex. He waved a letter in his hand and smiled frivolously. "You know, but you are not anxious about your own matters and instead worry about second young master librarian Jing?" Xin Miao's eyes suddenly moved and stared at him tightly. Her tone involuntarily became somewhat ruthless. "Isn't Marquis Xie meddling in other people's business? It's just a piece of paper. Why are you so nervous?" Xie Jingxing regained his frivolous look. "What kind of relationship do you have with second librarian Jing to help him like this? Or, Xin family's girl, what are you planning?" Xin Miao's face was as heavy as water as she quietly stared at the paper in Xie Jingxing's hands. The paper was thin, but it was a heavy stone in her heart. It was the circulation of law that she had memorized for a long time. In the past lifetime, Pei Lang relied on this piece of paper and was discovered by Fu Xiuyi. From then on, Fu Xiuyi took him in as an aide and gave advice to Fu Xiuyi's empire. Now he had yet to show his talent, but Xun Miao wanted to cut off all possibilities. Not only that, it was best for Pei Lang to never work for the imperial family. This was the safest approach. And the second young master of librarian Jing's family, Gao Yin, was a newly emerging aristocratic family in the Ding capital. The imperial family of Mingqi wanted to suppress the old aristocratic families, so naturally they had to support the new aristocratic families. The librarian Jing's family was the most prominent branch that was newly supported. The eldest young master of librarian Jing's family, Gao Jing, was truly talented, and after Fu Xiuyi ascended to the throne, he greatly supported him. The librarian Jing's family thus received grace and became more tyrannical. And this Gao Yin, he even coveted her Wanyu. If she was not the mistress of the 6 palaces at that time, and Fu Xiuyi had not started to deal with the Shin family, one feared that Wanyu would have been killed. This Gao Yan's talent was not as good as his older brother, and he was extremely vain and always liked to take his older brother's achievements as his own. He was a person who would seek revenge for the slightest flaw and was narrow-minded. In the past lifetime, Gao Yin did not enter the official career, and in this lifetime, the librarian Jing's family had not reached its peak yet. Gao Jing had just entered the official career not long ago, so she might as well put in more effort to send Gao Yin into this broad official career. She took Pei Lang's circulation of law to Gao Yin because she knew that every year during the academy examinations, Gao Yin would let the servant spend money to buy a copy of the examination paper. Today, she let Gu Yu and the others replace this copy of the examination paper. With Fu Xiuyi's character of cherishing talent, he would definitely win Gao Yin over at all costs. And Gao Yin had a vain personality and would definitely not admit that this was not his doing. For such a person to enter the Ming Qi's official circles, she wanted to see how these two people would fight against Fu Xiuyi, cutting off Fu Xiuyi's powerful arm and replacing it with an empty head that stirred shit. Xin Miao had such a good idea, but who knew that halfway through, Xie Jingxing would appear and make her plan fall through for no reason. Her eyes were bright, and it was as if thousands of words were gathered in the clear eyes of a cub. Xie Jingxing finally raised his lips and lazily said, "You do not need to show such a hateful expression. This letter was copied by my people, and the original copy is still in the hands of the Gao family's brat." Xin Miao was slightly surprised, as she had never thought that it would be such a result. She looked at Xie Jingxing and was silent for a moment before asking, "Little Marquis is broad-minded." "It is not that broad-minded. It is just that this Marquis has a point of praise." Xie Jingxing's eyes were slightly cold. One do not like to meddle in other people's business. Just as Xin Miao was about to speak, she heard Xie Jingxing's voice again. "Now can you tell this Marquis why you wrote a letter to the librarian Jing?" Xin Miao sighed in her heart. Even though she had the intention to tie the Xin and Xie family on the same boat, now was not the time. The discord between the Xin and Xie families had been going on for a long time and was not something that could be resolved in a day and night. It was a slow plan, but who knew that out of nowhere, Xie Jingxing was involved and the good plans were all messed up. She did not trust anyone and had her own path to walk. Be it Xie Jingxing or the Xie family, they were all chess pieces in the great scheme of the world. No chess player would explain the reason to the chess pieces. This marquis thought that for you to help him like this, unless you have a personal affair with him and help your lover to fight for the limelight. Xie Jingxing's smile was mischievous as he sized Xin Miao up, afterwards thinking that even though the second son of the Gao family is not a good person, his eyesight in picking females is not bad. He looked at Xin Miao. It was clearly an extremely beautiful eyebrow, but it was as piercing as the northwest desert. Also, if you want to help Gao Yin, it means that you want to help Warden Jing's reputation. But you don't help Gao Yin. That's the trash Gao Yin. It looks like you have bad intentions. He smiled maliciously, but his words hit the nail on the head. Xin family's girl, do you have enmity with Librarian Jing? Chapter 46. Xin family's girl, do you have enmity with Librarian Jing? Xin Miao quietly looked at the youth in front of her. His eyebrows were beautiful, but his heroic spirit was pressing. Even though he had a cynical expression, there was a steadiness that transcended his age. It was not what was shown on the outside, but when following him, there was a sense of security that even if the heavens were to collapse, the other party would be there to support it. Even in the previous lifetime when she was in the Qin country or in the inner palace, she had never seen such a clear person. With just one sentence, he was able to see through the heart of everything. Such an amazing and brilliant person had to die young. It was really the heavens being jealous of heroic talents. A flash of regret flashed in her eyes, but when she opened her mouth again, it was in a flat tone. Yes, this game of chess is laid out in a roundabout way. Xie Jingxing's eyes were scrutinizing. To go around in such a big circle just to send Gao Yin into official career. Could it be that you want to mess up Ming Qi's officialdom? Even though Xin Miao had lived for 2 lifetimes, her heart could not help but be slightly shocked. If Xie Jingxing's performance previously was that he was excessively smart and understood with a single point, then now this person seemed somewhat scary. Ordinary people would take 1 step and look at 1 step, and a smart person would take 1 step and look at 10 steps. Xie Jingxing's seemingly ordinary question was like taking 1 step and looking 1,000 miles away. Such a straightforward and undisguised knife made her somewhat not know how to answer. After a moment, she then answered, "What does this have to do with little Marquis?" This Marquis does not care about Ming Qi's officialdom, but the Marquis of Lin and cannot be touched. There was a warning in his tone. If you have any ideas on the residence of the Marquis of Lin, then do not blame this Marquis for being impolite. Xin Miao glanced at him. Xie Jingxing seemed to be extremely disgusted with the residence of the Marquis of Lin and in loved to go against his father, but now it seemed that it was not a complete disgust and one fear that he still placed the residence of the Marquis of Lin and in his heart. Otherwise, in the last lifetime, he would not have ended up with thousands of arrows piercing his heart to protect the reputation of the residence of the Marquis of Lin. And it was understandable for Xie Jingxing to suspect that she would take action on the Xie family. The Xin family and the Xie family had always been at loggerheads with one another. Moreover, the things that she was doing now were incomprehensible to others. In the eyes of others, it was indeed possible that the Xin family was setting a trap for the Xie family. Marquis Xie, rest assured. She spoke faintly. Her tone was as if she was talking about how normal the weather was today. The Xin and Xie families mind their own business. Naturally, there will not be any incidents. What Marquis Xie was worried about would not happen. A person's life is only for a few decades, and the wheel of fortune changes. Now the Xie family sees the Xin family as their enemy, but they do not know that there will be a day in the future when we will be in the same boat through thick and thin, sharing a common enemy. Are you expressing goodwill to me? Xie Jingxing raised his eyebrows. Yes. Xin Miao said calmly. Xie Jingxing sized up the girl in front of him. He had seen countless women since he was born. When he was young, those women wanted to get close to his father. Later on, those women started to get close to him. Among these women, there were those who were as beautiful as flowers, those who were devastatingly beautiful, those who were good at wielding swords and sabers, and those who were good at strategizing. Xie Jingxing had seen tens of thousands of intelligent people, but there was no one that surprised him like the person in front of him. Perhaps it was the intuition of someone who had experienced the battlefield, but Xie Jingxing could smell the scent of blood from this young girl. It was like a pool of stagnant water, but there was a huge, ferocious beast lurking at the bottom. Now on the surface it was calm, but it was just waiting for an opportunity to move. When the day comes that it would break through, it would be a reign of terror. Even though this looked somewhat ridiculous, an unmarried female, how big of a storm could she stir up? But Xie Jingxing would never underestimate his intuition. The young female was covered in a lotus-green silk cloak, and her pretty face was covered in frost. In this lush and verdant plum forest, there was a feeling of a 9-foot palace when she stood there. Noble, lonely, decisive, and bottomless abyss. Chapter 47. There is actually an intelligent person in the Shin family. His words were rather sarcastic, but he still said seriously, "Since that is the case, then go ahead and do it. Take it as watching a good show today. Do not disappoint this Marquis." He stood up and was about to turn and leave. "Marquis Xie," Shin Miao called out to him. "What else is there?" He stood still and asked without turning his head back. The two Shu younger brothers of the Xie family will also go up to the academy examinations today. Shin Miao said lightly, "Marquis Xie, just let it go like this?" The two Shu sons of the Xie family, Xie Chang Wu and Xie Chang Chao from Yinyang, Madame Fong, were currently in 2nd grade. In fact, Xie Jingxing was also a 3rd-grade student in Guangwentang, but he naturally did things freely and Guangwentang could not restrain him, so he was left to his own devices. Otherwise, Xie Jingxing would be taking the academy examinations with his two Shu younger brothers. In the past lifetime, Xie Jingxing did not participate in the academy examinations, but his two Shu younger brothers snatched the limelight. In all fairness, Xie Chang Wu and Xie Chang Chao were considered to be very capable and were among the best in the martial arts category. Because of this, they gained the emperor's eyes and were later promoted by Fu Xiu Yi to work beside Fu Xiu Yi. Shin Miao had always felt that the Marquis of Lin and father and son were intelligent people, so how would they end up in that kind of ending in the past lifetime? Even though the imperial family gave a pension at the end, the ones who were sheltered were Madame Fong and her 3 sons. In fact, there was no lack of doubts when one thought about it carefully. For example, the toppling of the Shin family in the past lifetime. The 2nd and 3rd household played a part in it. Looking at it this way, could there be an internal problem in the Xie family? You do not wish for this Marquis to go up and compete with them? Xie Jingxing turned his head back and said with some surprise, "Just like how you compete with your older sister? Is Marquis Xie's situation not the same as mine?" Shin Miao did not care about the ridicule in his words and said, "The ones who stab the deepest are the people closest to them. I naturally understand that a noble person like Marquis Xie would disdain to be calculative with a Shu son. But the collapse of a 1,000-li embankment would be caused by an ant's hole. This seemingly unremarkable thing is like a venomous snake lurking in the dark." Her tone was very clear, and it was obviously a warning tone, but her eyes were as clear as a child. "Cut them in the bud. I want them to never sprout. Compared to letting them enjoy the limitless glory and receive the support of nobles, pretending to be brothers and sisters forever, isn't it better to challenge them one by one and make a fool of themselves in front of others, so that they don't have to pretend in the mansion?" Xie Jingxing's heart moved. His mother was the Golden Branch Jade Leaves Princess Yu Qing, so he did not want to be calculative with the son of a concubine. If he did that, not only would people say that he was not magnanimous enough, they would also mention that his birth mother had been angered to death by jealousy. He could ignore his own reputation, but he would always care about Princess Yu Qing's reputation. In the residence of the Marquis of Lin An, even though the Marquis of Lin An was biased towards him, it was inevitable that outsiders would gossip. Yet, the 3 of them still had to pretend to be obedient and loving, which made him feel nauseous. He only wanted to be an outsider and watch these 3 people put on a show, but now Shin Miao's words made his heart moved. Wouldn't it be better to extinguish their hopes? Shedding all pretense of cordiality in front of them, so that they would no longer have the face to respect each other and annoy each other? Xin Miao's voice seemed to be bewitching as she said, "It has been too long. Do not endure it. Do not endure it." He lowered his head and looked at the person who was close at hand. There was a faint fragrance coming from the young female's body. Like her, she looked pure but was actually cold and heartless. He clearly knew that she had a purpose in her suggestion, but it was impossible to refuse. His lips hooked up into a smile, and with a sweep of his sleeves, the begonia flower on his black hair fell into his palm. In the next second, the place where the begonia flower was had turned into a small jade begonia. He picked up the flower and said in an ambiguous tone, "You are interesting. This flower is for you. The suggestion is not bad. Many thanks." Chapter 48. After Shen Miao exited the plum forest, Gu Yu and Jingzhe, who were guarding, let out a sigh of relief. Jingzhe looked up and did not see anyone and was somewhat puzzled. Why is there no one? Shen Miao also turned back to take a look. The plum forest was lush and swayed gently with the wind, but there was no one there. Xie Jingxing was someone who knew martial arts, and most likely he had disappeared by leaping onto roofs and vaulting over walls. She said, "Let's go." When they returned to the banquet, Feng and Ning hurriedly ran over and complained, "Did not I say to wait for me?" One could not see anyone after turning one's head. When one returned, one did not see you here. Where did you go? Looking at the chrysanthemum blooming well and casually walking around, Shen Miao looked up at the stage. Has it already started? You have been gone for a long time, and the male group had already drawn lots. Feng and Ning curled her lips. Now it is the male group selection. The youths on the stage were competing, and the first round of drawing lots had already passed, so Shen Miao did not care about the results of the competition. The second round was selection, where one had to choose the subject that one was good at. Shen Miao's gaze landed on the leftmost side of the opposite banquet, on the youth wearing lake green clothes. This youth was dark and strong, and his facial features were not bad, but because of his overly strong body, he looked somewhat solid. Moreover, he still had to wear green clothes, which made his skin look even darker than before. Not only that, his hair was combed into a high bun with a bamboo hairpin inlaid with jade. Most likely he wanted to imitate the style of an ancient gentleman, but because he could not bear to dress up in a rich and noble manner, it looked somewhat nondescript. In a word, even though he wanted to be aloof and free from the mundane world, he was unable to hide the vulgarity of his entire body. This was Gao Yin of the historian of the capital. Gao Yin was still young, as he was only 16 and his wings had yet to fully develop. It was until after Fu Xiu ascended the throne that Gao Yin rode on Gao Jin's wind to rise in status and bullied men and women in the Ding capital. He even dared to covet Wan Yu, which was extremely daring. Once she thought that Wan Yu was once teased by Gao Yan's words in the palace, Shen Miao was unable to restrain her anger. She stared at Gao Yin from afar, as if she was looking at her prey jumping into a trap. Gao Yin seemed to be thinking of something. His face was full of joy as he said something to Gao Jin. Of course, he was happy to receive such a unique essay. He had just drawn Jingyi in the lottery, and his performance was mediocre. As long as he brought out this policy paper for that selection, he would be able to shock everyone. Shen Miao laughed coldly in her heart. Go, take this policy paper and go to Fu Xiuyi's side. If he entered the official career before Gao Jin was promoted, he believed that with Gao Yan's methods, he would definitely be able to personally destroy the entire capital's warden. This was her gift to Warden Jing. As for Pei Lang, she turned to look at the green-robed man sitting not far from Fu Xiuyi. From now on in this life, you will slowly repay the debt you owe in the past. Shen Miao, after the men's group, it's the women's group's turn to choose. Will you choose? Will not. Shen Miao answered. During the academy examination, every student had to draw. Choose was based on one's own will. If one didn't want to choose, one could choose not to. So rather than saying that choose was a part of the academy examinations, it was better to say that it was a part where one's strong points could be displayed. If there was something that one was good at, naturally it could be displayed in the choose segment. So compared to draw, everyone was more enthusiastic about the choose segment. This was because the choose segment would display something that one was extremely confident in. But if one was like Shen Miao, who did not have any strong points, then one might as well not participate in the choose segment, as one would only make a fool out of oneself. Why? Feng and Ning was somewhat disappointed as she said, "Aren't you good at drawing now? There should be some strong points in the other categories. Why not simply display it?" "There is no need." Shen Miao started to fiddle with the chess game on the table and replied to Feng and Ning without even lifting her head. "So what if I am in the limelight or not? There is no difference between the two. Moreover, I am not proficient in the four arts, and it was just luck just now." "You?" Feng and Ning was flustered. Who would say that about themselves? Fifth younger sister. A voice interrupted their conversation, and one did not know when Shen Yu stood in front of them. She said with a worried face, "Fifth younger sister, are you really not going to participate in the next choose segment? Could it be that second older sister wishes for me to participate?" Shen Miao retorted with a question. Shen Yu was choked by her words. She did not know why, but Shen Miao seemed to have steeled her heart to shed all pretense of cordiality with her. Shen Yu was also puzzled after much thought. Could it be that the matter of falling into the water was directed at the second and third household? Even though she was puzzled, she had accumulated anger in her heart towards Shen Miao, who did not know what was good for her. Shen Yu bit her lips and seemed to be a little wronged as she softly said, "Naturally, I hope that fifth younger sister will participate. Just now the drawing was extremely good, and since fifth younger sister has such talent, why not continue to choose the drawing category, so that everyone would not talk behind your back? If the drawing is done well again, then the rumors would be destroyed." Shen Yu's voice was not low, and the surrounding were all young ladies and furins so naturally they could hear every word clearly. These words did not seem to be anything, but it spoke out the suspicions in everyone's heart. Even though Shen Miao's white chrysanthemum painting was ranked first, but she had been an idiot for so many years, and the impression in people's hearts would not change so easily. Of course, they would not believe that this painting was drawn by her, thinking that perhaps there was someone guiding her from the side. Shen Yu also thought so in her heart, so she thought that as long as Shen Miao drew another painting in the second round, without the guidance of others, how would she be able to draw anything good, and would definitely make a fool of herself? Feng and Ning heard the meaning behind it and immediately sneered back. "Second Shen young lady said it so easily. One must also pay attention to the composition of a painting. Even if second young lady were to draw by herself, it would not be possible to consecutively draw two paintings. Shen Miao was only a student and not a master of calligraphy and painting. Did I not see that fifth younger sister has made great progress? That's why I asked." Shen Yu smiled gently. Just now such a good painting could be drawn out. So what is not possible to draw another one? Shen Miao did not raise her head from the beginning to the end and only placed a chess piece on the chessboard loyally, not interested. "Thank you for the trouble." Shen Yu did not expect that in front of so many people, Shen Miao would dare to answer in such a lukewarm manner, and for a moment her face was somewhat embarrassed. The most infuriating thing in this world was to lay a trap, but the other party refused to take the move. Even when Shen Miao was facing everyone's suspicions, she still refused to accept her provocation. This made Shen Yu even more certain that the meaning of the painting was not what Shen Miao thought. The thought of making Shen Miao make a fool of herself was even more deeply rooted in her heart. She paused and suddenly continued to smile. "Since fifth younger sister insists, then I will not say anything more." She turned around and returned to her seat. At the male side of the banquet, Kailin had been secretly looking at Shen Yu, but saw Shen Yu suddenly looking over from afar and seemed to smile gently at him. Kailin was startled and was somewhat excited. However, he saw Shen Yu lowering her head and seemed to be somewhat sad. He suddenly became nervous. Chapter 49. On the stage, the male group selection was still ongoing. Classics and poems were all conforming to the rules and regulations, so there were naturally many people who chose. As long as one had an outstanding memory or studied thoroughly, generally speaking, it was easy to stand out. In contrast, there were only a few people who chose the field of policy theory. Policy theory was based on the current state of affairs and was very practical. This topic was also the one that was closest to the affairs of the imperial court. Everyone present was a young student. Other than a few disciples who had already begun to accept the teaching of the manor, the majority of them were still ignorant of the affairs of the imperial court, let alone give any good suggestions. Thus, policy theory was the most difficult, but if one really stood out, one would have half a foot in the official career. Xin Miao looked at the chessboard in front of her. At that time, Pei Lang's circulation of law was done in the third round of selection. In that selection field, the male could choose the female could choose the male, and the students could naturally choose the teacher. And one of the male students picked Mr. Pei Lang. Pei Lang was also brimming with talent. Just a few steps on the stage and in a blink of an eye, a policy theory was done. It was voluminous, quoting from classics but not exaggerating and always hitting the key points. It was really amazing. At that time, it made the princes pay attention to it. But Pei Lang was also a clever person. He only wanted to be a teacher in Guangwantang and did not think much about other things. His attitude was firm. If not for Fu Xiuyi's courtesy and Shen Miao's advice, this Pei Lang might not have entered the official career. The chessboard crisscrossed, just like the life of the previous life. She lightly flicked her sleeves, and the entire game was disrupted. Shen Miao put down a piece. How about starting a new game with her as the starting point? Gao Yin adjusted his sleeves and tidied his hair before asking the servant beside him, "How does this master look?" "Young master is distinguished and elegant, handsome and chic." The servant also said flattering words. Gao Yin proudly curled his lips and was about to get up and walk to the stage. Seeing this, Gao Jin grabbed him and asked, "What are you doing?" "Choosing," Gao Yin said. Gao Jin frowned. He was very clear about this younger brother of his. It was fine if he didn't have the ability to begin with, but he still loved to show off. Currently, historian advisor Jing's Fu was flourishing with each passing day. They absolutely could not allow any mishaps to occur at this time. Gao Jin asked, "What can you do?" These words were unpleasant to Gao Yan's ears. He and Gao Jin were biological brothers from the same mother, but when people talked about the Gao family, the first person they would praise was Gao Jin. Gao Jinsheng had delicate features, but he was rough and tanned. Gao Jinsheng was able to handle matters for his father at such a young age, but every time he wanted to talk to his father about court matters, his father would shake his head impatiently. As brothers, there was originally no discord between them, but because of the eyes of outsiders, there was a gap. Gao Yin was already a little sensitive and inferior under his brother's light. Now that he heard Gao Jin's words, he was even more angry. He was originally a little hesitant about whether the manuscript was too well written and whether it was too impressive. But now, he didn't hesitate at all. He said in an unkind tone, "Big brother, although I'm not as smart as you, I'm not a complete idiot. You don't have to stop me. After all, I can't steal your limelight." Gao Jin heard the hidden meaning in Gao Yan's words and paused for a moment. Before he could speak, he saw Gao Yin push him away and walked up the stage. From afar, he shouted, "I choose policy theory." Policy theory? It wasn't that no one in Guangwantang recognized Gao Yin and naturally looked over. Speaking of which, it was strange. Gao Yin himself didn't have much ability, but in Guangwantang, he was quite good. Because every time his homework and manuscripts were written by others, although he couldn't be considered a great talent, he was still considered outstanding. Chapter 50. Thus when he went up the stage like that, no one was surprised. This was because in the choose line, what was shown were the best things that one had prepared. But policy theory was difficult. Thus the originally noisy crowd quietened down in an instant as everyone looked at the green-clad youth on the stage. The first few students who chose policy theory had already read out their own policies. However, it was not considered good. When Gao Yin went up, Gao Jing frowned. One did not expect that Gao Yin would dare to pick policy. Feng Ning said curiously, "If it was Gao Jing, I would feel that it would be better." Xin Miao stopped the chess pieces in her hands and looked towards the stage. Once everything was prepared, Gao Yin took out a piece of paper and slowly read, "Law, the frame of a country, especially set on wood, supporting it to the heavens." He read in a cadence, and the crowd's initial look of watching a bustling scene gradually disappeared, especially the masters and officials at the banquet as they looked seriously at the youth on the stage. Gao Jing's younger brother is indeed not bad. A flash of amazement appeared in Prince Zhou's eyes. This kind of policy theory, even the daring in the court would not have such incisive views. It is indeed not bad. Prince Jing also nodded his head in praise. Moreover, this child is still young, and in the future, he would definitely not be an ordinary person. Fu Xiaoyi quietly looked at the person on the stage. Even though there were no fluctuations in his expression, his fingers unconsciously twisted. His fingers unconsciously twirled. Whenever he had a thought or an idea, he would subconsciously do this action. Obviously, Gao Yan's actions made him have a new plan in his heart. As for Pei Lang, ever since Gao Yan read the first sentence, his body stiffened. He did not know why, but he felt that Gao Yan's policy theory seemed familiar. But he had always had an outstanding memory, and after thinking about it carefully, he still could not make heads or tails of it. Most likely he had not seen it before. But this feeling of familiarity actually made him, who had always been calm, a little anxious. It was as if every sentence that Gao Yan read, he would be able to follow up with the next sentence. It was incomparably familiar, as if it was his own thing. Xin Miao smiled gently and no longer looked at the youth on the stage, but continued to look at the chess pieces on the chessboard. She casually picked a piece and placed it at the edge of the chessboard. "What kind of chess are you playing?" Feng Aning asked. "Just randomly playing." "Who would place the chess pieces so far away?" "Far?" Xin Miao shook her head. Every chess piece had its own use. How far could this seemingly useless chess piece go? Even if it looked like it was still 108,000 miles away from the situation, it was still an indispensable part of the future general. Could he see it now? From a distant pavilion, one could see the entire scene on the stage from afar. Su Mingfeng waved his fan and said, "One do not know where did Gao Yin found this essay from, but it was written in an elegant and unrestrained manner. I would like to get to know the person who wrote this essay." "So what if I know him?" The purple-clothed youth opposite him spoke lazily. His whole body was sitting in front of the window of the pavilion. Leaning against it, almost half of his body was sticking out. It should be a knowledgeable daring. Su Mingfeng did not think much of it. If one is able to make friends, one would definitely benefit a lot. Xie Jingxing sneered and turned his head to look at the stage as a begonia appeared in his hand. The crabapple blossoms had not yet withered, as if they had just been plucked, fresh and moving. They seemed to contain a quiet fragrance, but also seemed a little austere. Not necessarily. Chapter 51. On the stage, Gao Yin finally finished reciting the circulation of law. The surroundings were quiet before whispers started to discuss. The students did not understand the meaning of this treatise and only knew that it quoted classics and was very gorgeous. But the Darren at the male side of the banquet understood the depth of it. This treatise looked casual, but it was able to point out the loophole in Ming Qi's laws in one fell swoop and ingeniously changed it to make up for it. For a student, it was somewhat inconceivable. The examiner on the stage did not expect that Gao Yin was really hiding his abilities. But the rules still had to be followed. Once one had doubts about the student's results, naturally one would have to test it first, just like Shun Miao's painting previously. In all fairness, this circulation of law was more brilliant than Shun Miao's painting, as it had both literary and practical qualities. The examiner then asked, just like what the treatise said, Ming Qi's laws encompass a wide area. You said that there is a need to subdivide it. How do you subdivide it? Gao Yan's heart was delighted. Other than the circulation of law in the manuscript, there was another question that was exactly the same as what the examiner asked. He was very grateful to the person who wrote the manuscript for him and thought that in the future he would give more money as a reward. Therefore, he calmly puffed out his chest and raised his head, answering according to the script. There are 3 levels: the commercial path, the official path, and the civilian path. Below the stage, historian Jing Darren was already grinning from ear to ear. He was able to reach this stage in the officialdom because he relied on the emperor's support and wide connections. But there was really no one with such ability. Luckily, he had a good son, Gao Jing, who was able to help him deal with many things at a young age. Now that his second son, Gao Yin, had displayed such extraordinary abilities, he had to return to the ancestral hall to burn 2 joss sticks and pray for his ancestors. Gao Jing was smarter than his father, but he did not believe that his own younger brother would have such wisdom. Facing the examiner's questions, he was able to speak with assurance and composure. One could not possibly even bribe the examiner. Thus, he could not make up his mind. Pei Lang picked up the teacup on the table and took a sip. His hands were still slightly trembling. He did not know why, but every word that Gao Yin said seemed to be imprinted in his mind. That kind of familiar feeling made him feel ridiculous, and the anxiety in his heart could not be calmed. Su Ming Lang had just dozed off and saw that the people around him were looking at Gao Yin on the stage with an expression of appreciation. She simply tugged on Lord Su's sleeve and asked, "Father, is what he said good?" "A young talent," Father Su said directly. Su Ming Lang pursed his lips and seemed to be unable to understand. After looking around and not seeing Su Mingfeng's figure, he asked, "Why is older brother not back yet?" Old Master Su coughed softly. "Your big brother's body is weak now. He was forced to come today. Let him rest a little longer." Fu Shtoi heard the movements over here and glanced at Master Su. Seeing that Master Su's expression did not change when he mentioned Su Mingfeng, he then withdrew his gaze thoughtfully. No matter what, Gao Yan's battle today was extremely beautiful. He was able to deal with the examiner's questions with ease, dispelling the doubts in everyone's hearts. Without any explanation, he naturally obtained the first rank. The ranking was secondary. In the future, when Warden Jing was mentioned, apart from Gao Jin, everyone would also know that he had a young and talented second son. Gao Yin got off the stage proudly. This round of selection ended, and the female group selection also began. Feng and Ning did not go up the stage. She was already outstanding in the Qin category, and just now she had already drawn the Qin category. Since the other items were not outstanding, there was no need for her to go up the stage. Shen Qing chose chess. She was good at chess, and chess also needed to be calculated, so she was considered to have some expertise. As expected, Shun Yu chose Qin. Chapter 52. Shun Yu had always loved these things that could make her seem out of this world. Because Chen Rochio was originally good at playing the zither, not only did she know how to play it, she also knew how to compose some songs and write some lyrics. Shun Yu had learned this skill very well. Every year she would be able to get first rank. Thus every year here, it was the time for everyone to appreciate her zither skills. In the female group, once Shun Yu was there, the others would not choose the zither category to seek their own humiliation. Shin Qing naturally put in effort, and in the chess category, she got first rank. After going around and around to the zither category, the audience started to discuss again. Shin Yu walked up the stage and burned incense and bathed her hands. She was born with a delicate and graceful air, and her soft, pink robe was extremely moving. But with a shallow smile on her lips, she really had the appearance of a little fairy. She was playing Chant to the Moon. Chant to the Moon was an extremely difficult song, and it was about a wanderer far away who missed his homeland and loved ones. The beginning was gentle and melancholy, followed by intense sorrow, and at the end it made one sigh. The transition from start to finish was a test of zither skills, and it was emotional. In the previous lifetime, Shinyu was also in the limelight of this song and was unparalleled for a while. In comparison, she was even more unbearable. Now thinking about it, it seemed that every time Shan Yu's good reputation was to step on Shan Miao's embarrassment to climb up. Shin Miao looked at the young female on the stage. Shun Yu had already started. When she plucked the zither strings, it was as if the zither strings had spirituality as it spread softly in her hands. The song was ethereal and had a charm that drifted into everyone's ears. Her fingers flew on the zither strings like a butterfly shuttling through a sea of flowers. Every turn was coordinated and natural. Feng and Ning bit her lips. Even if she did not like Shen Yu, she had to admit that Shan Yu's zither skills were outstanding. In comparison, the song that she got first rank just now was really clumsy. That was a song of longing for one's loved ones and homeland, but it made Shun Miao's fists gradually clench. Even if one were to relive a lifetime, the dead could not be resurrected. Wan Yu and Fu Ming would not appear again. This song of Shun Yu's was like a death knell of vengeance and resentment. In the ears of those who heard it, not only was there no comfort, it was filled with blood hatred. Kai Lin ran out of the banquet. He tried his best to get closer to the stage so that he could see every expression of his sweetheart. He was intoxicated by the beautiful sound of the zither, but was suddenly interrupted by the sound of someone talking. The second young lady is really unlucky. She has never been the second place, but the fifth young lady took the first place. The one who spoke was a slender maid, and Kai Lin recognized that she was Shan Yu's personal maid, Shu Xiang, and involuntarily looked over. That's right. Moreover, the fifth young lady doesn't even choose. She is deliberately going against the second young lady. Another maid said, Alas, it's a pity that our second young lady has a kind heart and has been bullied by fifth young lady in private. Didn't the fifth young lady dare to treat the second young lady like this because of the first master? Second young lady is so pitiful. She had prepared for so long, but the fruit was snatched away by someone else. It would be great if someone could help the second young lady vent her anger. For example, let the fifth young lady go on stage during this election? What nonsense are you talking about? Shu Xiang interrupted her words. Everyone knows that the fifth young lady is not proficient in the zither, chess, calligraphy, and painting. Picking the fifth young lady, isn't it lowering one's own status? I think it is impossible for the female group. If the male group were to pick her, that would be helping the fifth young lady to vent her anger. The voices of the conversation gradually became softer. Kai Lin's eyes moved as he looked at Shen Yu on the stage and had an idea in his heart. Chapter 53. Shen Yu's song ended, and everyone listened as if they were intoxicated. A female with outstanding zither skills would be loved by everyone, especially when this female's looks were not bad, at least in the male side of the banquet, not to mention that the Grade 1 children were too young. There were quite a number of Grade 2 and Grade 3 youths that were looking over here. Even though in Guangwentang, Qin Qing's appearance was a level higher, but Qin Qing's temperament was arrogant, and how could it be compared to Shen Yu's gentleness? This younger sister of yours plays really well, Feng and Ning reluctantly said. One do not know where did the zither master was invited from. Tomorrow I will ask mother to help me find a famous zither master to teach. It was the time when one was young and loved to be competitive. Just like when Shen Miao was just appointed as Empress, she was relaxed about everything, but Fu Xiuyi's heart was tightly controlled. As long as Fu Xiuyi was slightly good to other females, she would be extremely worried. The inner palace was the most troublesome and would privately trip others up and stab others in the back. She had the temperament to immediately get back after suffering a loss and thus offended a lot of people. Now, this temperament did not change at all, but there was no need to hurt herself. Speaking of which, second young lady of the Shun family is a rare beauty and talent. Everyone loved beauty, and Prince Zhou was also amazed by Shen Yu. He only said, "It is a pity." Others might not understand what was a pity, but it was impossible for the few princes to not understand. Shen Yu was born with a delicate beauty and infinite talent. If there was such a beautiful and understanding person by one side, perhaps it would be a great thing in the world. Unfortunately, she did not crawl out from Shan Foreign's stomach and was not the daughter of the first household of the Shen family, but the third household. Unfortunately, Shen Xian, who held the military power in his hands, gave birth to an idiot like Shen Miao. Even if she looked different today, how could one's impression be changed overnight? They believed that Shen Miao's propriety today was because there was someone guiding her from behind, and her heart was still that idiot who did not know anything. After Gao Yin stepped down from the stage, Pei Lang's mood gradually calmed down. It was the first time in his life that he encountered such a situation. Even though he was puzzled, he tried his best to reassure himself. At this moment, when she heard Prince Zhou's words, she could not help but look at the purple-clad young lady on the opposite side of the female side of the banquet. She held the chess piece and tilted her head as she pondered. It was too far, and one could not see her gaze clearly, but one could feel the scrutiny and deep meaning in that gaze, just like when Shen Miao looked at him. How could such a person be an idiot? But people would not change overnight. Could it be that Shen Miao's previous stupidity was all an act? Why was that so? As smart as he was, he couldn't figure out what was going on. The female group selection ended with Shen Yu's singing to the moon. Shen Yu naturally took the first rank, but the her today was not happy because of this, but felt somewhat embarrassed. She looked at Shen Miao, but Shen Miao was engrossed in the chess game and did not look at her at all. Shen Yu knew that Shen Miao was not proficient in the zither, chess, calligraphy, and painting. Thus, naturally, she would not be able to understand that chess game. Now that she was looking at it seriously, it was only to deliberately give her face. Chun Rochio noticed her expression and reminded her softly, Yuanyang, you have forgotten yourself. Chun Rochio requested her daughter to be calm and composed no matter what situation or what happened. No matter if one was really calm or pretending, one must let others see a calm side. Once a female was calm, their temperament would be superior and flustered would not be the bearing of an aristocratic family. In all fairness, Chun Rochio's way of teaching her children was indeed not bad, and she herself also did a good job. Unfortunately, Shen Yu was after all young and had never experienced failure before, thus did not know how to endure. Hearing Chun Rochio's reminder, Shen Yu slightly put away the anger on her face. The maid by her side, Shu Xiang, handed her tea. Young lady should drink some tea to moisten your throat. Shen Yu took the tea and looked at Shu Xiang. Shu Xiang smiled at her, and Shen Yu understood in her heart, and the smile on her face became more real. She said, it is somewhat hot. I am very interested in this selection later. Because Shun Qing had just obtained the first place in the chess competition, her mood became a bit better. She said with a smile, this year, there will be no division between the male and female groups, nor will there be any division between the second and third countries. The competition will definitely be more intense. Originally, that selection was the one that people looked forward to the most out of the three. Because the drawing would not necessarily draw the best and that selection was to choose the best performance, then the selection would always happen between the two most outstanding people. The selection in the female group was not very intense because the females would always be amiable on the surface and also show that they did not care about the results and had an indifferent attitude. But males were different. Youths like to use the method of comparison to determine victory and defeat. At this age, the desire for victory and defeat was the strongest, so that selection every year would be the most intense. This year's selection did not differentiate between male and female, second or third countries, and all the students could compete together. As long as one wanted to challenge someone, naturally one would be able to compete with that person. But even though it was said like this, there would not be any challenges between males and females. As expected, there was no one challenging the literary category this year, and the highlight naturally fell on the martial category. This almost cut off the possibility of females participating. Even though there was no lack of daughters from military families who knew martial arts, but females as compared to males, their strength was much worse and naturally it was impossible for them to succeed. At the males' banquet, Kai Lin was the first to stand up and walk up to the stage. The examiner asked him what was the challenge, and he pointed to the bamboo stick for archery and said, archery. Everyone understood. Kai Lin, this little tyrant, did not know anything about the literary category, but he was considered outstanding in the martial category, among which archery was the most outstanding. Naturally, his archery was top-notch, and he had obtained the first rank in archery in last year's academy examinations. Who was the one that he wanted to challenge today? Looking at the entire audience, there was no one that was more outstanding than him in archery. Kai Lin raised his neck and suddenly stretched out his hand and pointed at the female side of the banquet. When everyone saw that he was pointing at the female side of the banquet and not the male side of the banquet, they were surprised, and when they saw who he was pointing at, they opened their mouths in astonishment and even stopped their discussions. He deliberately said loudly, I want to challenge her, Shun Miao. That purple-clad young female who was immersed in the chess game raised her head and looked at the person on the stage with clear and sharp eyes. Her expression did not fluctuate and her actions did not make any mistakes, as if this earth-shattering sentence was just a casual greeting, and she did not even bother to reply. Chun Rochio frowned. She wholeheartedly taught Shun Yu, but Shun Miao seemed to have learnt to remain calm. In a distant pavilion, the handsome youth who was leisurely drinking tea sprayed out a mouthful of tea, and a trace of surprise appeared on his frivolous expression. Is the Kai family's boy crazy? Shin Miao stood up. In the chess game on the table, there was a black chess piece that crossed the boundary and was heading towards her. The first pawn was dispatched. She picked up the white chess piece and swallowed the black chess piece before throwing it into the chess basket. Receive, she said. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference. as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.